Okay, so say if you have $60,000 here in Australia to buy one of the best driving hot hatches available to you on the market. Well, you have two options right here. One is the 2022 Hyundai i30N dual clutch transmission, because this one I think is a little bit more fun than the manual. This is the 2021 Toyota GR Yaris. This is a cult classic and rally homologation special. It's a fantastic option, but with this out in the market, it makes it a bit of a harder decision to confirm which one is better out of the two. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drive them back to back and let you know which I think is the better driving experience and better hot hatch for less than $60,000. So some of you may be wondering why an i20N isn't sitting here instead of the i30N. Well, I don't think that stacks up against the GR Yaris because it's significantly cheaper and it's down 50 kilowatts compared to the Toyota GR Yaris. So I think these two make a better match because they both have 200 kilowatts and they're both around the same price. Now to find out which hot hatch comes out on top, let's get into it. My name is Cameron, this is Product Review Cars, and I'm looking forward to this review. And so starting with the Toyota GR Yaris, I reviewed this one as my first car I've ever reviewed for Product Review Cars. If you want to buy one today, it's going to cost you over $55,000 drive away. Now it's pricey for a three-door hatch, but keep in mind that this is a road-going rally homologation special, so it's a little bit more special than just a three-door hatch. It's part of the 200 kilowatt club with 200 kilowatts and 370 newton meters of torque being produced from this 1.6 litre three-cylinder engine. And look, it's a special car, but the price it demands brings it up away from the league of the likes of the i20N and more into the realm of the i30N, hence why they're going head to head in this review. Now, what do you get for spending over $55,000 on a Yaris? Well, there's a few bits and pieces on the outside. One of them being these larger brakes, which are slotted as well as ventilated, so they're a little bit more advanced than the ones we saw on the i30N, and they're very large for a car like this. Now remember, the GR Yaris only shares its name with the Yaris. The rest of it is all specific for the GR Yaris, like the all-wheel drive system and this carbon composite roof, complete with a carbon fiber look cover, so that looks fantastic. Around the back, we also have dual exit pipes, but sadly, those don't sound as impressive as this car looks. Now this is the 2022 Hyundai i30N. It sits on the other corner against the GR Yaris, and that's because they have similar amounts of power, they cost about the same, and to be honest, I think this is the best example of the Hyundai i30N. If you want to see a review on the manual and what it's like to drive over 1,000 kilometers of driving, I've done a full review on this car down in the description below, but this is focusing on this dual clutch transmission, which I believe is the every man's Porsche PDK. Now this is the i30N Premium with sunroof, and with this automatic gearbox, you're looking at around $56,000 by the time you're on the road, and that's really comparable with the GR Yaris in terms of performance and price. Now, it wasn't just price as to why I picked the i30N DCT to go up against the Toyota GR Yaris. It's because it's also part of the 200 kilowatt club. This produces 206 kilowatts and 392 newton meters of torque on overboost from its 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder motor. Now, this weighs a smidge over 1,500 kilograms, so that's a few hundred kilograms more than what the Toyota GR Yaris weighs. So we'll see how that goes out on the road. Now, in terms of some key performance parts on the outside, we have some forged wheels, which save around 14 kilograms to the entire car's weight. We have N performance brakes, which are specific for the i30N, and they're only used by Hyundai for this car because they're not some off-the-shelf Brembo brake set, which I think is pretty cool. We have a wider front track, and we have an N performance body kit with a lower and adjustable suspension system here on the car. And then there's some trick arrow around the back with this fold on the rear bumper, and also a functional boot lip spoiler. And of course, it wouldn't be an i30N without having this unrivaled exhaust noise. So take a listen. Now, key features of the interior include these N Performance bucket seats, which on the N Premium is what you get, and they save around 2 kilograms of the car's weight. And then you've also got some Alcantara throughout the interior. We've got a nice leather wrapped steering wheel. We have a far superior infotainment system, in my opinion, with plenty of readouts for performance pages and also ways to customize your driving experience beyond just the drive modes. Additionally, drive modes up here on the steering wheel, which makes it easy to adjust while you're driving. I think the seating position is quite optimal, and I feel like I've got a great view out and I feel comfortable and low in the car, although I do feel a smidge high up off the ground. And on the surface level, this does feel like it has more tech than the GR Yaris, even though they have relatively similar amounts of technology when it comes down to the features that they have, like heated seats up front and adjustable drive modes. Each in their own way are very unique. Now on the inside, we do get some pretty cool things like these bucket seats, which are a lot more comfortable than the N performance bucket seats we see on the i30N. We have a great driving position. It's got a heads-up display complete with a rev counter and all the other vital information you might need, as well as a shift indicator. So that is something that the i30N doesn't get, even though this has a pretty poor infotainment system and it looks very ugly in its placement here, and very basic driver's displays, as well as, you know, a full color display in the middle, but it's not as advanced as the i30Ns. Now, in terms of features, we do have heated front seats. We do have a heated steering wheel. I don't know why that's a theme in hot hatches nowadays, but everyone seems to be getting a heated steering wheel, so they share equipment like that. But what I can say is that even though this is manual only and the i30N is DCT, even in its manual configuration, the i30N did not feel as slick as the GR Yaris feels here. Both are very comfortable cabins and feel very sporty for the price you're paying, but I would say that the i30N does feel like it has a more spacious interior, where this really feels like you're packed in as part of a road-going rally car. Now, of course, this being a road-going rally car, the weather being a bit crap, and us being on a bit of dirt, I think it's time to go see how this drives. So the GR Yaris, this took the world by storm when it first launched, and it still is an absolute riot in the headlines. People love this car, and for good reason. It's beyond capable for a hot hatch. It really is special, and it's something deserving of its own class, because you can't get an all-wheel drive hot hatch at this price point, but you also can't compare it to front-wheel drive hot hatches as well, because it's too expensive and too quick against those. So when I see reviews against the i20N and this, I really don't think 150 kilowatts in a front-wheel drive non-rally homologated special versus this, I don't think it's a fair comparison. Sure, price is like, you know, all practicality of a smaller hatch. Everyone goes, oh, that's more comparable. But I thought bringing an i30N dual clutch transmission, the best of what Hyundai is doing with a 200 kilowatt car, and for the same price, was a far better comparison. So that's why I brought both of those cars out here. Now let's do a quick little launch in track mode with the GR Yaris. So we're good to go, and so the thing with the GR Yaris, it doesn't feel quick off the line. It's not like it's blisteringly quick, throws you back in your seat, but what this engine does really well is that it's tuned to then basically make the most of that red line, similar to what the i30N does, but it feels a lot more linear in the GR Yaris. Now, this manual transmission is an absolute treat. Oh my gosh. I first tested this car when it had a far less amount of kilometers on it than it does now. This has traveled now 10,000 kilometers, and it's just as good as the day I drove it for that review. It is awesome. It's got a fantastic feel to it, and really, it's like driving, I keep making a lot of Porsche analogies. I know it's really stupid to make, but they do make the best sports cars in the business, so it's only a compliment when you do so. But it does feel like the shifters I felt in the Cayman GT4. It is very precise and there's a nice weight to it, where it feels like a bit of almost jewelry in the middle of the car. It's sort of like a nice watch when you get a good manual transmission. It's just mechanical engineering working together to make you feel a lot more happier. So that's what's happening here. Now let's get some cornering going. I'm in track, so what that does is it splits the power between the front and back wheels in a 50-50 split. So it means you can just grip through corners no problem. And it's just so much fun, and this engine is just so much more alive than what's in the i30N. Now, I'll shift it into sport now because that's a bit more fun because that sends 70% of the power to the rear wheels, which is very unique for a chassis like this and a car that's got this short of a wheelbase. Now, it doesn't have the shouty exhaust note, and look, for some that might be a bit of a, dull moment in their car. They might go, hey, look, I really wanted a bit more hot with my hot hatch in terms of the sound it makes. Now this is where the two cars start to split. The GR Yaris is not about creating theater in the way of, making you feel like you're having a good time all the time. Instead, it's a track focus and rally focused car. To give an example, here's a sound test of this exhaust. And I'll shift down to first so we can get a nice earful. On camera, this is going to sound like a bunch of wind noise, but what you get instead is a bunch of mechanical noise. It's the transmission, it's the turbo whooshing, it's the intake, it's all these different sounds that mix together and make this car just so entertaining. So if it's your only car, and that's the only thing keeping you going, and you're going, okay, well, it feels special to drive, but it doesn't have that loud exhaust note, it's probably not going to keep that feeling if this is the only car you're driving. Okay, so just like the GR Yaris video, I'm not talking about practicality and all that sorts of stuff. I have already done a full review on both cars, which the links are in the description down below. This is on how these cars drive and make you feel, and it's really a comparison test to see which one makes the better hot hatch. The two modes I'm going to be cycling through in this car is N mode, which I'm in now. You can see it's very bouncy, and I've set up custom mode to basically do everything that N mode does, but just without the back braking suspension. This does have adjustable suspension, which is done 3 ways. However, I find 2 and 3 to be very similar, and number 1, which is this softer setting, to be the most relaxing for around town, and it's still even quite rigid even at that. Now, this 8-speed dual clutch transmission blew my mind this first time I got really involved with it, and it's really because I've been lucky enough to drive a bunch of different Porsches, and this is as close to those Porsche gearboxes that I can see around this price point. Now, the only other manufacturer that does something very involving like this below $100,000 are the likes of the ZF gearboxes put into Alfa Romeos, but this is a hot hatch we're talking about, not some European performance car. And so now let's begin with a short little launch off the line. So I've put it into manual mode, and here we go. Oh yeah. So you can really feel this car come alive when you've got everything turned on in the right ways. You can put it in normal mode, but that's just not the way to experience this car when you're by yourself. If you have passengers who complain a lot, sure, that is the absolute benefit of this car, is that you can tone it all the way down so people can be comfortable if they don't like hot hatches. Now, what really impressed me was the response from this 8-speed dual clutch. It's nice and snappy on the paddles, and it actually makes me want to use them instead of just leaving it in drive. It's very reminiscent of Porsche PDK in that sense. Downshifts are responsive, although when you try to go for some gear changes, it can get a little hung up on getting down a gear pretty brisk, and I'm pretty sure it's just preserving itself from over revving all that much. But that's the only downside compared to the manuals, that you can't downshift as fast to a very high gear if you want to, but you rarely will be doing that, and in most instances the dual clutch does a very good job of getting down the gears. Now, putting it into N mode, because that is what all this driving is about, and we really get a great sense of what this car is all about. I love driving this thing around little tight streets, and also just getting a feel for all that power. 200 kilowatts comes on nice and strong, but it's not overwhelming, which I love about this car. It is very usable power because of the weight. Now, that exhaust note isn't just all for show, it actually is a little bit functional. It's meant to act as a rudimentary form of anti-lag, so keeping that turbo spooled while also creating plenty of theater out the back. I actually think this is louder than the manual, and when you go for downshifts, it really does sound like gunshots. It is brutal, and it had me even turning down the exhaust when I needed to around town, because sure, I love loud exhaust, but I don't want to become everyone's enemy at the same time. Now, cornering, these cars do a great job, but the wider front track in the i30N compared to some other hot hatch rivals is very noticeable, and it means you can get a nice and solid feel through a corner without feeling like you're gonna lose grip. Now take a listen to how brutal this exhaust sounds. Ready? That doesn't sound legal, but hey, you bought it from factory like this, and thing is nutty. Now in this N Performance blue color, plenty of people look at this car. It is a looker in the sense that people just go, hey, it's a pretty aggressive looking car, sounds good too, wonder what it is. Now popping this transmission into drive, there are two different modes in here which help with enhancing the experience. One is N-Track Sense Shift, which is a very convoluted name for basically meaning that the car's transmission will adapt to how you're driving. So if I start to get on it and, you know, go into drive, go into N mode and just absolutely hammer it out at the track, the transmission will adapt, and it will mean that I will be able to just get the transmission where I want it to be when I am driving more aggressively. And then when I leave the track, for example, or leave my fun bit of road, I can then have the transmission relax, which is a pretty cool feature. You've also got N Power Shift, which is a cool little feature, and that means that the car will power through gears when you have the space to do it. So it sort of gives you that real dual clutch, bang, 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 without sort of ironing out the shifts in between, which I love, and it feels great when you really get on it. However, the only issue is that you do need speeds of more than, say, 60 kilometers an hour to really feel that engagement, or at least be out on track. That's a great little feature for when you're entering highways and going on high speed bits of road, but for the daily grind, it isn't all that noticeable. Now, as for these brakes, going into a corner like this one, we can get on it and yeah, see, they didn't really get the instant bite that I was craving, which I sort of found out when I was way out in the country experiencing the i30N manual for the first time. These are nice and progressive, and they do feel like they are beefy brakes, and they do a great job of slowing down, but they don't feel as instantaneous as the rest of the car feels when you've got it in its most aggressive setting. Now, what I love about the i30N as well is that you can turn off creep start with the transmission. So it means that when you go into manual shifting mode, you really can actually have a great dual clutch experience, and something that I thought I'd never be able to see or experience in something this far south of $100,000. That's a fantastic feature to have, and really makes you feel like you've got a performance gearbox in a car like the i30N. Now, one of the final features I have to showcase here is N Grin Shift, and this thing is a ton of fun. So it's like Porsche's push to pass button that they have. So we go up to here and then we can get going. And it basically puts the car in its sportiest setting, so just like Porsche's sports response button, and it just gets on it, and it makes sure that the car's in its most sporty setting for you to make an efficient overtake, or if you just want to have a bit of fun for about 20 seconds and you just can be in any drive mode and have fun like that. I love that feature so much. Okay, so these two cars here both do the hot hatch requirement really, really well. One feels like an absolute rally homologation special, which this is. It doesn't feel like anything but. It's all-wheel drive, it's got the grip, it's got the looks, and it's got that provenance that makes it a bit more special compared to the i30N. What the i30N is, however, it's a technological marvel in the hot hatch industry. Obviously, the sound is way more impressive for driving around town and will put a smile on your face without risking your license like this will. This also does carry some pretty good looks to it, but I personally prefer the looks of the GR Yaris. The i30N is more practical with an extra set of doors, but that's not the be-all and end-all of this comparison. This still has some nice wide entry doors, and it's a little bit more comfortable thanks to its softer riding suspension compared to the i30N. But what I love about the i30N's dual clutch transmission option is that it really is the everyman's Porsche PDK. It is a killer option for the track, and it's also a lot of fun when you're driving around on some back roads. That makes this a really appealing option. And in this comparison, I think the i30N dual clutch transmission comes out on top only because here in Australia, it's not gonna risk your license as much as this thing will. This thing is awesome, but you really need to be pushing it to get all the involvement out of it that you can. That means more frequent visits to track days, even though this doesn't have a track day warranty where this does. And this also means driving out further to find some more fun roads. This still is an absolute killer driving experience and it deserves its cult classic status. But the i30N makes for the better hot hatch and will be one of those things where you can get into it and drive it around and have a blast of a time without having to worry about, you know, absolutely pushing it to get everything you want out of it. This is a lot of fun. And the fact you can dial it back to make it drive a lot like a normal hatchback, where this thing is sort of on all the time, even though it's a bit more softer in its setup and more relaxed and still quite a capable hot hatch, this is appealing for the on and off switch. Say if you have someone who wants to get in and enjoys a hot hatch versus someone who gets in and wants everything turned off, you can do that in this, where this sort of only has the one option. Now, thank you so much for watching. My name's Cameron. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any future hot hatch comparisons like this, and I'll see you in the next one.